Hi, this is Jill Reynolds with The Connection Show. And joining me today is this amazing man that I met, Michael Alexander. You will be so excited to hear his personal life story and all of the amazing things that he's done. Before we begin the show, though, today, I'd love for you to learn about holy hydrogen. Do you desire wholeness in your body and health with your connective tissues and overall well-being? Well, listen to this message from Holy Hydrogen, and when you go to order, make sure you use the promo code Braveheart to receive up to $100 off. This is amazing technology and unbelievable wellness for your health. So listen to Holy Hydrogen.
Hydrogen is used by health professionals as a powerful antioxidant and the number one tool to fight inflammation. Studies show therapeutic potential in cancer, diabetes, digestive, and heart issues, and essentially every organ and system in the body. This is not medical advice, because I'm not your doctor, but if you have any health concerns, I strongly recommend that you learn more about hydrogen. Get educated at holyhydrogen.com and order the best hydrogen generator known to man. Use code BRAVEHEART for $100 off your order. Because hydrogen is the smallest molecule in existence, it can pass through the cell membrane and even the blood-brain barrier to clear out inflammation and free radical damage where other antioxidants just can't get to. Visit holyhydrogen.com to see the latest technology that elevates your immune system and fights inflammation. Search their research library to see if hydrogen has a track record for helping a health concern you're dealing with. Make sure to use code BRAVEHEART for $100 off your order. Remember, holyhydrogen.com.
The Connection Show. Inspiring hope, health, healing, connecting the dots of your story and transforming your life. Sponsored by Braveheart Workshops, live with Jill Reynolds.
Well, welcome back to the show, and we hope that you will look into that holy hydrogen so that this year and going into 2024, you can have optimal wellness. Well, our guest is just exciting to get to know, and joining us today is Dr. Michael Alexander. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, we are excited. So I'd like to not waste one more moment. We'd like to jump right in and utilize this time to get to know you, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So if you wouldn't mind, take us on a journey back to, and I don't know what your mom and dad called you, little Michael, Mikey. Take us back to the times of your childhood and bring us forward from junior high, high school, and what you're doing today, if you wouldn't mind taking us on a journey.
When I was 3 years old, I went with my father to the airport to pick up my mother. And as we walked down to pick her up, my mother looked at us, and my father and I both have feet that sort of splay. And my mother said, "Boy, you can tell you're father and son." And I looked down, and my feet splayed a little bit more. Because in that moment, I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to be just like my father. And all these decades later, I still feel the same way. And it meant that I had to do things to be like my father. I watched the way he walked. I listened to the way he talked. And by the way, my mother could not tell the difference between the two of us on the telephone. I made every effort to be like my father. Now, there were changes I had to make along the way, but it meant that I made myself who I wanted to be. It meant I could never accept anyone who said, "Well, that's the way I am. I can't change it." Because you can. And I did. And they can too. So that's how I grew up. And did I have fun? Yes. Did I make fun of life? Did I do things a little off center as my father did? Absolutely. On the other hand, I also learned to think a little creatively the way my father did. My father, as your viewers probably don't know, was the inventor of the barcode. And it happened that while he was putting it together, he had a small motorcycle accident just as I was learning to drive. So I would ferry him to work, and he'd work on it, and he'd put me to work. So technically, I worked on the invention of the barcode. And I still have, give me a second here. This is the original barcode. So that got me as far as college. I went off to college where they did a survey. Each of the students were tested to see where their interests lie. And I went to the professor who gave the test, which amazed him because nobody ever went to him. Nobody ever asked what their results were, but I did. And he looked at the test and he scowled. He looked at me and he scowled. Back at the test and he scowled. Back at me and he said, "Are you having a hard time choosing a major?" Well, my father and I had spent 2 years figuring out what was the best fit for my interest in mathematics, in the environment, in everything else. And he'd come home every week with a different career for me to think about studying. And I went to college deciding that I would start as an economist being involved in ecological matters. And so I turned to the fellow and said, "No, I'm very happy with my dual major in math and economics." Why? Because you have the damn levelest set of interests I've ever seen. Nothing's outside of standard deviation. And he's right. I'm interested in everything. The world is a giant, beautiful ecosystem, not just environmentally, but in terms of the way the world, the society, people all fit together. It's wonderful. It's magical. And that's, go ahead.
So let's pause a moment. Let's pause a moment. And on the show, Michael, I love to go deep. I love depth, and I know that you're very intellectual. So let's go deep into the emotions of Michael. So we have the intellectual. Let's go into the emotional. So going back emotionally within your family structure, what emotions did you go through growing up as far as what led you emotionally connecting to Dad's path where you had this, and I look at it that our own identity is self. And so it sounds to me like your identity kind of merged in with Dad. So at what point did you see yourself separate from Dad with your own emotions, desires, and what struggles did you go through in pain? In this world, it says, it's in the Bible, it says, in this world we will have trouble. We never get through life with everything going so balanced and well that we never go through pains and struggles. So what are some of those things emotionally and struggles you saw in your childhood that you went through?
Well, before I answer that, I want to say yes, there are struggles, there are challenges, there should be. That's part of the fun gamesmanship of life. And so each struggle is a new challenge to conquer, and each conquest is a new celebration. And so, yes, I had my troubles, and I'm not going to avoid talking about them, but I want you to realize I did not suffer through them. I worked through them. Now, I was a heavy kid. Kids teased me. I didn't like that. But I also realized that if I let them control my world, I lost. And so I didn't. Now, Star Trek was very popular at the time, and the stoicism which Mr. Spock used affected the way I handled troubles and emotional, whatever. So I was teased, yes. I was big and strong enough, and I beat up a few kids. They didn't beat me up. And the teachers felt this odd mixture of distressed at the fact that I resorted to physical violence sympathy for the situation. And as I recall one exchange, someone said to me, "Michael, use your words." And I said, "Words don't work. You want me to fail, or do you want me to succeed?" And they accepted that. Did I struggle sometimes with my teachers? Yes. Because I was not a kid who did what I was supposed to do.
So
I was a kid who did all what worked.
So when you say you were a larger sized boy, were you?
No, I said fat. Let's be honest here.
Okay.
I said fat.
So what caused you to be fat? Were you binge eating? Were you utilizing food to stuff emotions?
No, I was just essential. I was just a sensualist. I liked food. I liked flavor. So when food was there and it was tasty and I was hungry, I would indulge.
So did your parents ever talk to you about nutritional eating to the point where, I mean, I know as a mom, you know, when raising children, we look and observe and we see when children are hurting and when you're being bullied. So you're sitting there and you are being bullied and you're a man of change. And so part of change is habits and changing the way we eat. And yes, you could like food, but there's other nutritional ways to eat, and there's exercise and ways to deal with our body's situation. So do you have a point in your life that you ever said, I've got to get a grasp on this? Yes, I can. I mean, every one of us, loves food. I think most people like food. Maybe an anorexic does not. But most people like food, but there's balance versus imbalance in life with eating. So it seems to me that, so let's go back again. Let's go back a little bit and more in depth, because you mentioned your dad and you mentioned your mom for 2 seconds. So in your family tree, generations, in the Bible again, it says there'll be 4 generations of sin, and we need to look at those to break those habits so that we can have blessings. So generationally, great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, did you see anything within their lives that had been some patterns of binge eating, addictions, divorce, anything that you saw that there were patterns of that you saw your family starting to break?
I'm going to start off by being honest enough to tell you that I never knew either of my grandfathers. They both died of heart attacks. They had bad hearts, but they were not particularly heavy, either of them. My grandmother was not particularly heavy. Neither of them were particularly heavy. In fact, my maternal grandmother was comparatively thin. My mother was a high school teacher, and she would work late into the night grading papers and whatever. She was very dedicated to getting all of her students' stuff properly graded and properly done through. She would often consume large amounts of sugar in order to keep herself going. But when she stopped being a teacher, she stopped eating that heavily. So, not particularly a generational problem. My father was not particularly heavy either. And when I say I was fat, I am perhaps exaggerating to some degree. I had a notable gut. I was not covered in fat. I was certainly capable of, as I say, beating up the other kids. So it was not a terrible health problem for me. It was enough to tease me. It wasn't enough to endanger me. And yes, they did encourage me to be more abstemious in what I ate. But it wasn't a massive problem. It was just, we all have things. Now, my grandfather, who, as I say, passed away, technically I was 4 months old, so was a street orphan in the streets of Atlanta. And as my father put it, There were things that my father did because his father did them and he liked them. Things that my father did because his father did them and he couldn't get away from it, and things that my father did because he didn't want to do what his father had done. And in that same way of growing, my father encouraged me to be my own person. So you talk about being who my father was or separating from that. And by the way, my mother is very much part of who I am. I don't tend to talk about her as much, but she's very much an important person. She gave me my sense of dedication. She gave me my sense of sacrifice to help others. She gave me my love of the English language, which my father was no slouch, but still. So my mother was very much an important part of who I was. I mentally define myself by my similarity to my father, but I am very, very proud of the ways in which I am like my mother. And it's unfair to her, to some degree, that I talk about my father more than I talk about her, but she is every bit as much a part of who I am.
And are there siblings in your family as well, Michael?
Yes and no. Biologically, I'm an only child. Legally, I am an only child. But my mother was a high school English teacher, and several of her students would come to our house to drop off papers, or to chat, or to have dinner, or to stay until such time as they got on well with their parents again. So I grew up in what could best be described as an upper middle class commune. And there are certain of her students who I can only describe the emotional relationship as my brother or my sister. And that's very strong. Two of them still, my brother Ed particularly, his wife, at this point, I don't even call my sister-in-law, I call her my sister. His children are my nephews and nieces, and they very much feel that way to all of us. The biology is not important. So they're older than me. It's kind of strange to say that at 9 years old, I developed older siblings. But it also means that sometimes in conversations, I will say in the same paragraph that I'm an only child and refer to my brother or my sister. And people will have to figure out how to deal with the contradiction.
Well, that's a funny statement because when my son was growing up and when people would ask me my marital status, I've created my own marital status, Michael, as a single, never married mom. And that would throw people off, and they would say, single, never married moms. They'd say, I don't understand. One guy said, I don't understand. I says, well, let me explain. I had sex. I wasn't married. I had the baby. And that made me a single, never married mom. And I just had to do that because if I said I was single and yet I had a child, they would say, oh, are you a widow or divorced? I'd say no. And it would confuse them. So I created my own identity with that terminology. So, Michael, are you married and do you have children?
I am married. I have a son. Now, it's a son by an earlier marriage.
Okay.
But
all right.
just as I am an only child, he is an only child. Because I wanted to relive the relationship I had with my father from the other side. And I better understand it now because of that. And although I had thought that my father and I had the closest father-son relationship that the world would ever see, I was wrong. My son and I do. Now, he's an only child. I'm an only child. My grandfather was an only child. My great-grandfather was an only child. So it kind of runs in the family.
Now, was there any other was any other divorce in your family heritage, or was yours the first divorce?
No, my maternal grandmother was divorced, and her mother was divorced.
Okay.
My parents were very happily married throughout the 50-some years that they lived together.
Are they still alive or have they passed now?
They have both passed away.
So going back to struggles in lives, because again, there's always some, would you be willing, and if not, that's okay too, to share a little bit about the breakdown in your first marriage and then how you were able to get through that and then find the woman you're married to today?
Certainly. My first marriage was a girl I met when she was 13 years old. Now, I was 10 years her senior. I was her first crush, but I was not interested in a girl that young. I knew her. She was a nice kid, don't get me wrong. But there was no romance from my end in that time. We knew each other for a short period of time, and then the group which we were both part of, her foster parents pulled her out of. They felt it was bad. It was not good for her. And while it was a good group, I agree, it was not right for her. But 13 years later to the day, that is, I met her originally on her 13th birthday, and then by coincidence met her again on her 26th birthday. We came, she'd grown, I liked the way she had grown. It was a time in my life when I was, perhaps facing the biological clock, as it were. There was a lot of romance, but we were really not a good pair. Our lives were too different. I was more educated. She was less educated. I ultimately got a PhD while I was married to her. She never finished high school. And the difference in that and our interests, my intellectualism, her lack of it, meant that it was a mistake. And I have no animosity. It just didn't work. We had a son together, and we raised him together, and we worked cooperatively together. And I made sure that no matter what she had done wrong, I never criticized her before my son. And there were times when he would ask questions, and I would refuse to answer because there was no way to make her sound good, but I was not going to make her sound bad in front of him. And there came a point where we still are in occasional touch, not often. We exchange Christmas cards. But we both are in good touch with my son, and we talk to each other, and we speak supportively of each other to him, even though we're not to each other. Now, I enjoyed bachelorhood wonderfully, both before my first marriage and afterwards. Some people are destined to be married. Being a bachelor is a wonderful thing. It is a great thing. It's a wonderful way to go through life. But as it turns out, I got involved in one of those online dating things. And a woman responded. And this was correspondence. So we could be long and poetic and romantic, and just long distance relationships are just wonderful things, particularly if they're online. So it's all written and thought out, and you can have the poetry of it. And that's what she and I had. I discovered a few months later that I wasn't corresponding with who I thought I was. You see, her friend had thought that she should get into a relationship. And in a Cyrano de Bergerac kind of way, I was corresponding with her friend. Exactly when it switched and I was corresponding with her and not her friend, I do not know to this day. But the relationship blossomed. She and I eventually met in person.
The friend, right? The friend, not her. The friend, right? Because the friend was the one corresponding.
Well, no, her friend I didn't meet for 5 years later.
Oh, okay.
In person.
Okay, I thought the friend was the one that was corresponding.
Yeah, the friend was corresponding. But eventually it switched, so I was corresponding with my wife.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure when.
Because I thought maybe you were corresponding the whole time with the friend poetically, and that's who you were falling in love with.
All I know is the Cyrano story does work in real life. Although my nose is a little bit more normal, I like to think. So is hers, actually. But so that's, we met, we fit, we had laughter. She's actually an incredibly amusing person, which, now she's Asian. Most Asians are not that funny. They have amusement, and there are definitely some. But she's very funny, and she was also very sensitive and very good listener. We had a lot of very deep and long conversations. And we married. The marriage is another story. My life is full of stories. But, and we are very happy to this day. And I'm saying that not just because she's still in the other room listening.
Well, I'd like to pause a moment and just go to your bio for a moment here. So Dr. Michael Alexander has a website, which is leprechaun, and it's spelled here the right way, .com. And his title of today's topic is Change the Focus and Find the Solution. So this is how you can reach out to him. So Michael, in closing today, because we...
Excuse me, if I may.
Yes.
Leprechaun.com is, if you will, my personal site.
Okay.
But you can find more about how I work and what I speak on by going to alexandertalks.com.
Okay. And so today, what is Dr. Oops, you went on mute. What are you doing today in your life, Michael? So, and why would people want to reach out to you? So what are you doing today?
I work as a public speaker, and I work with people who want to create change in themselves, their organizations, or their associations, or even technical change. And I help them learn to think creatively. People become focused and tracked on a single way of thinking, which means that they're only going to come up with solutions that people have already come up with in that same way. I'd help them change the focus, change what they're looking at. And that brings them to find the solutions and means they can come up with a change in the world that they want to bring about.
And so today, what are you working at in your personal life to change?
In my personal life, there are a number of things. One should always be working to change and grow. I find that the lure of entertainment frequently gets in the way of my search for new knowledge. And I am somewhat embarrassed to admit that I am learning more from my son right now than from my own studies. I'm learning a lot from my son. My son is devoted to learning and knowing new things, but I'm not putting that same in. And I am easily distracted. This comes in part, I think, from my dyslexia, which dyslexia can be a blessing. A lot of people don't realize that because it gives you a different way of thinking, a different way of organizing data. But it also means sometimes you can get distracted because this leads to that, which is an important thing to know, to understand this better. But to actually sit down and do work as opposed to just picking up things is something that I need to work on, getting stronger about doing things.
So let's pause, because you just brought up a very, very insightful part of your story that you kind of slid past. And I think a lot of the people in the audience could identify. So again, remember, this is connecting the dots of your story, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so other people's lives can transform. So those of you who have struggled with dyslexia, Michael, can you take us back to when you were diagnosed and when you discovered you had dyslexia, and what kind of help did you get?
I was never diagnosed.
Okay.
Let me tell you how it came about and how I came to realize what was going on. It starts from the fact that I was taught to read before I learned the alphabet. And therefore, I learned to read words as a single shape without going through the individual components, which is how most people learn to read. So I didn't sound things out because I didn't see the letters per se. As a result, it became clear very early, like second grade, that I could read wonderfully, but I couldn't spell. And as I grew up, that didn't change. Now, I'm not one of the people who had a serious problem as a result of that, because I could read well. If you ask me the greatest invention of the 20th century, it's spell check.
So you grew up with a mother who was a teacher, and so very educated and very knowledgeable of learning. And so did your mother not catch anything different of your learning abilities as far as not seeing the spelling? And then again, you now say you're dyslexic, but you never got diagnosed. So at what point, did your mom ever catch anything or say anything? And then when did you discover you had dyslexia and use the word and claim that as part of your learning abilities?
My senior year in high school, they offered a course called Spelling for People with Spelling Problems. And as a senior, someone who was academically successful, broadly academically successful, I realized I had a spelling problem. So I took the course and I learned a lot of the theory behind spelling, which is something they never teach. And one of the things, simple test, spell the word icicle. Go ahead, do it for us. Spell the word icicle.
I don't know if I can. Icicle. ICILYCIC. It's like cycle. And I don't know. I can't do it on the air. If I wrote it, I probably could, because ICIALICAL.
You can stop. The first thing you did was you started to look for the word.
Yeah, in my mind.
Not in your mind. Your eyes went.
Yeah.
Your eyes went all over. And then you said, if I could write it down. Because for you, doing it visually, and that's what most people do. And good spellers do it so fast that you can't even notice their eyes flicker. Mm-hmm. But they see it. Now, I don't see it. And that's when I realized that I approached spelling and, in fact, most thought organization differently than others. And that's when I realized that what was going on was dyslexia. Now, again, I have no problem reading.
Yeah, like for me, for me, Michael, I'm a visual learner. I am not a reader. I mean, I literally cannot read a book and get past one chapter. I literally cannot. I read it, and then I go to the second chapter, and I can't remember what I just read. So I've tried reading for years, and I just can't get through it. So the way I learn is, like, now that we have YouTube, it's great, because I'll listen to a video, watch it, pause it, listen back, pause it, go forward. But when I can visually see something, I learn exponentially. But if I had to read it to figure something out, I can't get past it at all.
And that's something people need to realize, for people who have trouble reading or memorizing. It's a fully legitimate way to learn. Mm-hmm. We are so trapped, and this is why I say, change the focus. What you care about is getting things into your head, not reading, not learning it the traditional way. That's not what the goal is. It's to learn it. Mm-hmm. And if people have different methods of learning, like watching YouTube, like listening in lectures, I never took notes my entire college career. I have a PhD, and I never took notes. It worked for me. People keep saying, write it down, take notes. That doesn't work for me.
Well, and we're all so different. Like, I left home on my 18th birthday, and hitchhiked around the United States. So my knowledge is street knowledge. And yet I went on to become a highly successful salesperson, surpassing everyone I worked with. And yet I never had the college education or the book learning, but I had the street knowledge, and the way to connect with others is how I became extremely successful in my careers. So we're all different. I remember hearing, Michael, a story a long time ago about a man who he couldn't read. He hated reading. And Dr. James Dobson, a renowned psychiatrist, said to the mother one day, well, what does your child have a passion for? And she said, he loves motorcycles. And Dr. Dobson said, then go to the library and get every book on motorcycles and see if he enjoys reading. Well, that's the founder of Harley Davidson. So he went through this, and he hated to read, but he loved motorcycles. So we need to pause sometimes with our children and look around and see what it is they're passionate about, instead of doing the traditional way of learning, because there's so many different things kids are passionate about. And so, Michael, we're coming to a hard close here. There's so much more to learn about you, and I would encourage people to reach out to Dr. Michael and connect with him, because he's an amazing speaker. His knowledge blows my mind away. I could sit here and talk to him for days and days and days. But as you know, I love to get to the meat of who people are, and it's not always about their intellect. I like to get to their soul and their connection, and it's just been a privilege to get to know you a little bit more, Michael.
Thank you. It's been a privilege to be here.
And so we're going to pause, guys and gals, and just end with a couple of commercials from our sponsors. The one that I'd love to end with is the Reawaken America Tour. So I'm going to flash to that for just a moment. Is Aruba. Aruba is my favorite island. I've been to so many islands around the world, but I always want to return to the happy island of Aruba. It was inhabited by the French and Dutch. It's owned by the Netherlands, and it's a fabulous place to go. Michael, I'm just going to ask you, what do you prefer more? A snowstorm and a traffic jam in February, or sitting on a pristine beach with your feet in the sand soaking in vitamin D?
To be honest with you, I'm a Northeasterner.
Yep.
And my birthday is February. And February should have the snow where you get out there and you shovel and you meet your neighbors. And you get to watch your dogs pop up and down. So Aruba's lovely. I don't want to put it down, but I got to tell you, a snowstorm in February has got a lot going for it.
Well, but you didn't hear the host question. The whole question is a traffic jam in a snowstorm, bumper to bumper, sliding off the road.
I'm sorry. I learned to drive in icy snow conditions. They can be a lot of fun. So Aruba's lovely. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
But
so when would you prefer going to Aruba?
Any other time.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask you that off air, and we're going to plan an Aruba getaway at another time. Because I had one in October, and people said, oh, it's too nice out. Why to go to Aruba? So now I have one planned in February. So we're going to plan one around you and your date, and then you're going to help me to see who wants to go at a different time of year. But I'm going to play my Aruba commercial for those who do want to get away in the middle of February. And my birthday is February 12th. When's yours?
Groundhog's Day.
The 2nd.
February 2nd.
All right. My ex-boyfriend, Michael, in San Diego was at February 2nd. Let's go to Aruba, guys, and listen in. Join us for the Hope, Health, and Healing Aruba Connections Getaway for men and women, February 5th through the 11th, 2023. Are you overworked? Stressed out? Feeling exhausted? Is it time to spoil yourself? Breathe in life and relax at private villas in Aruba for 6 nights and 7 days. Renew your mind and body. Discover greater self-awareness. Join in connection, wellness, stillness, movement, enhance inner peace. Experience amazing beaches. Enjoy snorkeling, area attractions, shopping till you drop. Dine at fabulous beachfront restaurants. Imagine releasing anxiety, reconnect with yourself, restore your soul, bring your friends. Enjoy fresh and savory cooked meals, lasting memories. Join us now. Register today. Book your flight and get away to Aruba, February 5th through the 11th, 2023. Register by going to braveheartworkshops.com. Pack now and see you on the island of Aruba. Michael, before we sign off after listening to the Aruba, so I hope everyone will join me in Aruba because I love it and it's my birthday. So we're going February 5th to the 12th to celebrate me too. So come to Aruba to celebrate my birthday and I'd love to do it. You know, I was listening to this, Michael, again, I always pray and ask God to help me with connecting dots. And there was an important dot that I missed. So before I end with the outro, I have to have a dot that I need to connect. Obviously, from sharing today, and you said your mother was very important to you, but obviously your father was a lifeline within your life. So could you get a little bit vulnerable and share with us what it was like when your father and then your mother passed away? In which order? Did Dad die first? Did Mom? And what that was like for you?
My father passed away first. And you never want people you love pass away. Each day should be a blessing. But they do die. And the important thing about my father and I was when he was ready to pass, and I did get some advanced warning. And everybody loved him. They kept visiting him in the hospice. It was even the doctor who just met him came to visit him. But there was no questions unanswered between us. No I love yous unsaid. No apologies that needed to be given. So when it came to an end, we'd had our whole life together and we'd been together as we should be. And so I knew that his time was over. I knew that his life was complete. And I'm not a believer in an afterlife. So I knew that his story had been told and it was a good story. And I was sad, but not devastated because it was a good story. My mother, likewise, I knew was fading. She had reached a point where she was in her own home and she'd vowed she would die in her own home. She had caretakers who I knew, even though we were across the country. And she and I spoke every day on the phone. And again, There were no I love yous unsaid, no questions unanswered, no apologies left to give. And I helped her as long as I could. And when the time came, I was able to think about her story, a beautiful story, and all the people she'd helped, all the good she'd done, and said, that's a good story. I gave both of my parents eulogies. And in the tradition of an Irish wake, we didn't mourn their deaths. We celebrated their lives.
You drank an Irish beer.
We celebrated their way up to, as I say, I don't believe in an afterlife, but we celebrated their way up to heaven. And that's the way people who pass should be remembered.
And so, Michael, you said a very important thing. You said you don't believe in an afterlife. So growing up in your family of origin, was your mother or father churchgoers or God believers? Or was that something that you ended up believing in your life? Or were you raised that way?
I'm Jewish.
Okay.
And the concept of an afterlife is not a fundamental part of Judaism as it is in Christianity.
Okay.
Now, in some sects or deeper Judaism, you will see a belief in reincarnation, which is something that most Jews would in fact deny. They don't know that. But to me, it's about the story having been reached the end and being told.
So
the concept of infinity is not appealing to me.
But so growing up, did your mother and father go to temple? Did you go to temple growing up?
No, we celebrated in the home.
Okay.
We definitely had religion. We celebrated the holidays. We celebrated many of the Sabbaths. Okay. Not all, but many of the Sabbaths. So there was definitely religion in our lives. There was definitely belief. There was definitely things that I know. And in fact, one of the books I'm in the process of writing and may never finish is a book entitled Why God Hates Beige, where I talk about a number of the great theological issues.
Okay. So we won't go too heavy into that. I just wanted to know if growing up in your life, and so your family didn't go to temple, they celebrated in the home. All right. Great. Well, I need to go now for the ending because I need to do my show for 45 minutes and we're just about right there. So thank you for sharing that. But it just came to me at the end that I didn't have a chance to ask about your mom and dad. So thanks again, everyone, for joining The Connection Show. Thanks for joining us today on The Connection Show, where we bring you stories that will transform your life. The Connection Show would appreciate your support. Please go to either our Patreon page or our PayPal Me Now link today. We love our podcast show guests and appreciate our listeners and YouTube subscribers. Please go to our YouTube channel called The Connection Show and Braveheart Workshops and subscribe now. Remember to click the gray bell in the All tab so you don't miss any upcoming episodes.